Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the most pressing and frankly heartbreaking internal security crises happening in the Pacific region right now. We're talking about the escalating tribal violence in Papua New Guinea, specifically up in the Highlands. We're going to look closely at exactly why this violence just keeps surging, how it's mutated from traditional conflict into something far more destructive, and most importantly, how we can actually stop it. All right, let's get into it.
You know, there's a quote that really captures the grim reality on the ground. Entire villages burned, families displaced, children growing up knowing only fear and revenge. This isn't just some abstract policy issue we're talking about. It's a profound human tragedy. Over the last few years, sporadic violence has just severely worsened public security. In places like Enga province, the human toll is absolutely staggering. And we have to remember, when one community bleeds, the whole nation feels that pain and that loss of potential. You just can't build roads, attract investment, or improve schools when conflict keeps tearing down everything you build.
Section 1. The cost of conflict. Let's take a look at the modern landscape of this violence. To really grasp what's happening here, we need to look at the geography of the crisis. Just notice the concentration of those blue circles right there on the map, mapping out political violence hotspots in Enga province from January 2021 up to February 2024. Around areas like Wabag and the Porgera Mine, the sheer density of the violence is pretty alarming. To put it in perspective, in just one single intertribal clash back in February 2024, at least 49 people were killed. Dozens more have died in the massacres that followed, and tens of thousands of people have been displaced from their homes. It's this concentrated level of devastation that has completely overwhelmed local authorities and left deep scars across the landscape. So what's driving this? Well, one of the major underlying pressures is purely demographic. Over 50% of Papua New Guinea's entire national population is under the age of 24. That is huge. And in the Highlands, that proportion is likely even higher. So what we have here is a massive, energetic youth demographic, but they're growing up in an environment with incredibly limited economic opportunities and jobs. Without any real alternatives, this massive youth bulge is increasingly being pushed toward violence. They're just getting swallowed up by the fighting.
Section 2. The evolution of tribal warfare. We're moving from traditional mediation to total destruction.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand that what's happening now is not the tribal warfare of the past. Traditionally, a dispute had a very clear owner of the fight. That was the person with the initial grievance, and they were the ones responsible for starting and ending it. Fights were fought with basic weapons like bows and arrows, and the traditional elders actually exerted a really strong stabilizing influence. They stepped in to mediate. But today, it's a totally different story. Eager young warriors are frequently just bypassing their elders entirely. They're essentially fighting a sort of guerrilla warfare now. We're talking hired mercenaries, surgical strikes coordinated on mobile phones, and unleashing highly lethal, high-powered firearms.
So the really crucial takeaway here is this. These modern conflicts, they are no longer about conflict resolution or restorative justice at all. The aim today is ruthlessly simple. Destroy the enemy, completely, mentally, and physically, and take their land. See, in the Highlands, there's this profound, deep-rooted connection between identity and land. If you take away a tribe's land, you literally render them nameless. Warring tribes are now fighting to take ownership of their enemy's land by absolutely any means necessary, which just guarantees this persistent, brutal cycle of retaliation. Section 3. Fueling the modern fire. Let's look at the catalysts driving the violence today. Okay, so what exactly is throwing gasoline on these localized disputes and turning them into mass casualty events? Well, it's a really complex mix of systemic drivers. We already mentioned those deep-rooted land disputes, but you have to add in the tensions surrounding resource extraction. For instance, the hasty reopening of the Porgera mine without adequate negotiations or proper resettlement, that has severely exacerbated tensions. Often, the government just leaves landowner identification up to the resource companies, and they tend to prioritize expediency over real community engagement. Then, you've got to factor in elections. Modern politics in PNG often sees tribes aligned right down candidate lines, which turns political rivalries into deadly armed conflicts fueled by patronage.
But honestly, none of those drivers would be nearly as deadly without the totally unchecked proliferation of illegal high-powered firearms. We're talking semi-automatic weapons, even explosives like hand grenades floating around. Traditional disputes that back in the day would have ended with some minor injuries and a sit-down mediation now result in absolute massacres simply because the weapons have changed so drastically.
Section 4. The power of community mediation. This is locally led restorative justice in action.
Now, despite that really grim reality, we have to highlight that local communities are doing incredible work to hold the reins of peace. Take Operation McKim Save, or OMS. Established over in Enga back in 1982, OMS is this highly successful local division specifically designed to handle inter-clan conflicts. And they're adapting to modern times too. Their magistrates actually receive immediate alerts about trouble spots right on their mobile phones, which allows them to rush in alongside churches and the police to rapidly mediate conflicts. And it's working. Through these localized efforts, a lot of modern conflicts that could easily turn into full-blown wars are actually being settled within days.
And this local effort works beautifully hand in hand with the village courts. Papua New Guinea is incredibly diverse. I mean, we're talking over 800 different linguistic groups. So to manage disputes, village courts rely heavily on customary law. Instead of handing down strict Western-style prison sentences, they focus entirely on restoring relations. They prioritize community harmony, they create this atmosphere of respectful listening, and they aim for consensus and compensation. This type of restorative justice is just so deeply ingrained in the culture, and honestly, it represents one of the most powerful tools we have for lasting peace.
Section 5. Government Action and Reform. We're looking at top-down interventions for lasting peace.
As great as those grassroots efforts are, they just can't do it alone. The national government has a real dual-track responsibility here to implement top-down reform. So here's the actionable roadmap for the government. Step 1 is the immediate, absolute need to enforce gun control and get those illegal weapons out of the equation. Step 2 requires investing seriously in fair, transparent systems to resolve these land disputes. Step 3, ensure that resource extraction projects are delivering visible, equitable benefits directly to the local communities so nobody is left behind. And Step 4, strengthen local policing so the state can actually enforce the law out in these remote areas.
Regarding that first step, the government has actually launched a gun amnesty program that's running right through until August 2026. Their message is pretty straightforward. Hand in the guns, save lives, and claim the cash incentive. Now, while government officials view this as a super vital step to de-escalating the situation in the Highlands, it's definitely worth noting what the critics are saying. They argue that just swapping guns for cash isn't going to be enough on its own. They're urging that this amnesty absolutely must be paired with much deeper, structural law and order measures to truly be effective long-term.
Ultimately, though, it all comes down to this really simple formula. Economic opportunity equals better choices. The single most sustainable way to stop a young man from picking up a rifle and joining a mercenary gang is to just give him a viable alternative. That means building roads, investing in agriculture, supporting small local businesses, and improving education. If we want these young men to choose a different path, well, we literally have to pave that path for them.
Section 6. The Path to Peace. Breaking the cycle together.
As we wrap up this explainer, it's pretty clear there is no single silver bullet here. The only way forward is a truly multi-sectoral approach. But the good news is there are practical steps communities are taking every single day. People are actively choosing dialogue over revenge. They're standing firmly behind their local peace mediators and their traditional leaders. We are actually seeing youth actively rejecting violence and demanding education instead. Communities are pushing to share resource benefits transparently, and we absolutely have to acknowledge the fierce, incredibly powerful role women are playing in advocating for peace building at the local level. Every single voice matters here.
I want to leave you with this provocative question to ponder today. Will a committed combination of law, order, and real economic opportunity finally break this devastating cycle of violence? Or will the ongoing, unchecked rush for resources and power just continue to fuel the fire in the Highlands? The entire future of Papua New Guinea's internal security really hinges on the answer to that question. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep asking the tough questions.